We've just seized a tanker on the coast of Venezuela, large tanker, very large. Largest one ever seized, actually.
So as you have probably heard, yes, the United States seized a very large crude carrier, a VLCC tanker off the coast of Venezuela. But what does it all mean? Now, the first thing that stood out to me about this story is that this tanker was going to Cuba. I don't think that's any coincidence. No. You see, China imports the vast majority of Venezuelan oil, probably 85 to 90%. Cuba imports roughly one tanker a month. Yeah, so I just don't think it's any coincidence that they seized the tanker going to Cuba instead of China. Likely intended to not further disrupt relations with China, but seizing a tanker going to Cuba could actually have an impact right here in the United States, because it is such a large share of Cuba's oil supply, and the products that are derived from that oil actually come to the United States fairly quick. One of them being fertilizer. And they send a lot of that also to Latin American countries in the area that provide the United States with things. I'm not saying we're going to see a huge price spike in fertilizer or food prices. Could see some small spikes, but there will be a ripple effect into the United States. That's a month of imports for Cuba. Now, they can replace that oil elsewhere, likely either Algeria, maybe Russia, probably Algeria, maybe South Korea. And we do know there's an enormous amount of oil on the water, on the oceans around the world right now that's waiting to be delivered. This is the glut we've been talking about. So it likely won't take too long for Cuba to get their oil back. Now, a lot of people have been asking me about sort of the market value. What's the value of the oil on that tanker? Assuming it's loaded, and we don't know that it was, because we don't know if it was going to Venezuela or coming from Venezuela. We just know it was eventually going to Cuba. But assuming it's loaded, it would have around 2 million barrels of oil on it. Now, it's really hard to determine the value of that oil because Venezuela has to sell their oil at a very steep discount to market price. So you can't say, oh, well, the price of oil today is $58, so it's worth this, because that's not what Venezuela sold it for. But you could reasonably estimate that they likely got around $40 a barrel for that oil, which would be $80 million market value. In addition to that, the 3 refineries that are currently operating in Cuba are now going to be looking for oil. And if they don't get that replaced fairly quickly, could see some fuel shortages in the country of Cuba. Not that Americans much care about that, but it's just a thing that can happen. The third thing I'm really curious to know is, what is the United States going to do with that oil? Are they going to keep it, or is it going to be sold to pay back some of the many U.S. creditors that Citgo and Venezuela owe money to? One being ConocoPhillips, yes. And if it is sold to pay back those creditors, which, by the way, I don't think it will be, who's selling it and who's buying it? That's a question to ask. Another thing we don't know is who owns the tanker, and are they going to get it back? I'm guessing no. Now, trying to think like Donald Trump, if I had to guess what's going to happen with that oil, trying to put my mind in Donald Trump's brain, maybe they just stick it in the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. That's a possibility. Wouldn't surprise me one bit. Matter of fact, probably what I would do, if it's legal. If it's legal. I don't know that it's legal, but we do know that Donald Trump doesn't care if that's legal. Yeah. And I think the largest and biggest question we have to ask ourselves is, does this stop Venezuela from further exports? And how much? Does it completely stop all exports? Does it slow down some exports? Because Venezuela is currently exporting 900,000 barrels of oil a day. But the thing is, with the oil going to China, that means it's likely traveling on those very large tankers that hold 2 million barrels. That means there's likely just a tanker leaving the whole country every other day, not a fleet of tankers leaving the country. So with so few tankers carrying so little oil in a week, it would not be hard at all for the United States to completely stop all exports. And that would take 800,000 to 900,000 barrels of oil a day completely off the global market, which would offset roughly half of OPEC's production increases and could put upward pressure on oil prices. Not much, because we're way oversupplied, but it could be the difference between oil dropping to $50 and $55 a barrel. And does the United States want to get into another deal with China if they do stop those oil shipments to China? That is a question that I cannot answer, but it's also something that needs to be considered, because it's a strong possibility that Donald Trump just tries to cut them off completely, and it would not be that hard to do at all. Another thing, yet again, to consider is, could this be sort of a style of soft invasion that maybe starts a negotiation process where Maduro just leaves the country? Now, we know that he has asked for a substantial amount of money, or we have been told that he has asked for a substantial amount of money. I believe it was $40 million to just leave the country, and he would seek safe harbor in some country elsewhere. And I think they were looking for a country that would take him. I don't know if any of that's true, but this is definitely going to cause serious issues with Citgo, which, as you may or may not know, a U.S. judge recently decided to force the sale of Citgo. So they had to pay off their creditors. It hasn't occurred yet, but the judge has decided they must sell $5.9 billion to Elliott Management Group, which is a whole nother video, because they have ties, yes, to Donald Trump. But I think the thing people are most concerned about is this going to cause oil prices to skyrocket? What's this going to do to gas prices in the United States? It's not going to be that big of a deal. It's really not. And it's kind of interesting that that's always the first question people ask. But this situation here is not one of those situations. Venezuela simply does not export enough oil for it to have that big of an impact on global oil prices or the United States specifically. You know, they talk about OPEC nations being attacked and this kind of stuff all the time. And yes, Venezuela is an OPEC nation. It's just not one of those OPEC nations. Also, geographically, it's completely isolated from all the rest of the OPEC nations. There's no other OPEC nations that could be impacted by something happening in Venezuela. There is no Strait of Hormuz for us to worry about. There's no wider group of oil producers that could be impacted by it. So it's not going to have a huge impact on oil prices or gas prices in the United States. It could slow down the fall of gas prices. It could even stop the fall of gas prices, but I don't think it's going to put a lot of upward pressure on gas prices. But based on the comments Donald Trump made, I do believe we are going to very soon see further intervention. I don't know if this is the seizure of another tanker or if this is military intervention, but he did state more things are to come. And just that statement alone will prop up oil prices just a little bit. That's just how it works. Let me know what you think in the comments section. Please ask questions if you have any. Please like and share. Really appreciate all my new followers and subscribers. You guys have a great week. Thanks.